saw it fit to spotlight the lives, stories, and contributions of these nation builders who make up the PSOJ Hall of Fame. The PSOJ believes that Jamaica's true potential can only be realized together, and together we can make Jamaica a nation to be proud of, a place to live, work, and raise families.
Let's hear about his journey through the private sector.
Sure. My name is Joseph Matalon, and I served the PSOJ, I guess, in two stints. One between 1986 and 91, when I served as a vice president on the officer corps and as a member of council. And then a second stint, which was, I guess, 2009 to 2012, when I served as president. I had always wanted to find ways and means to contribute not only to the private sector, but to the betterment of Jamaica in general. And I think that the PSOJ, which I consider as much more than simply a private sector lobby group, but rather as a major civil society organization that is able to influence policy and to create a kind of accountability of persons both in the private and public sector, that I think is the cornerstone of a functioning democracy and a functioning economy.
What's a significant milestone in your journey that you're proud of?
There are a couple of things I think that I'm particularly proud of, and both of these things occurred during my tenure as president of the PSOJ. The first that I would mention was the establishment during my tenure of the private sector working group on tax reform, which brought together all sectors of the private sector. We also invited unions to sit on the PSWG to formulate recommendations for tax reforms that could have the effect of boosting economic growth and development. Our report, I think, was issued in between elections. We finished the work maybe in 2012, and then there was a change of government. You know, they had to get back up to speed. But I'm happy to say that ultimately a number of those reforms were implemented by the government of the day. In particular, there was a complete overhaul of the business incentive structure within the tax system to be far more neutral, far more automatic, so people didn't have to be applying for waivers or applying for particular incentives. You know, a particular incentive can now be accessed simply by, doing what you need to do. You don't have to put the politicians in the difficult position of having to decide whether one person should get an incentive and another not. And I think that those reforms were implemented finally in 2013, eliminated a number of the incentive legislation that had been on the books for many, many years, and was replaced by a neutral tax system that I think was beneficial to all sectors of the private sector and not any particular sector. I believe since that time, far from actually reducing tax revenues, the data will show that tax revenues actually increased in the private sector quite substantially. And I believe it has also been helpful in promoting economic growth and development, in particular in the tourism industry, which I think between 2013 and now has seen remarkable growth and development. And while some members of the sector were reticent about the removal of the existing incentives, I think they will tell you today that they believe that the thing is fair, and they're satisfied with the way in which the tax system now gives them incentives to invest and grow. Okay, the second one, again, during the same period, the same tenure, was beginning in 2011. It came on the back of the Tivoli incursion in 2010. Yeah, obviously the private sector was very concerned about the advent of the incursion. It amounted in many respects to an insurrection, but we were also very concerned about the loss of life that took place. And I think that the events of that day also brought into very sharp relief for members of the private sector the plight of unattached and at-risk youth in some of our most impoverished communities. People who may have been failed by the education system, who leave the education system without any skills, and who have to find a way to survive, but unfortunately fall prey to the attractions of gang life and scamming and all the other things that we know are kind of sore points in our social and economic space. And a number of private sector members approached us as an officer corps and said, look, the PSOJ has to respond to this. They have to provide some kind of intervention that expresses a recognition of the plight of these young people, and actually does something concrete to assist them. So we brought the members together and they designed an intervention that came to be known as the Youth Program, Youth Upliftment Through Employment. It was a US $10 million program between 2011 and 2013, so approximately 3 years. We intervened in the lives of perhaps 5,000 or 6,000 youth during that period and provided layered interventions, including things like remedial literacy and numeracy, which was an issue. We did diagnostics on the front end and found that over 60% of our applicants needed remedial literacy and numeracy in order to be able to absorb the balance of the program. We also included life and employment skills training and internships, mentorship, and a number of other layered interventions that I think ultimately had the desired effect on a number of these young people. And one of the things that gives me the greatest satisfaction from time to time is to walk into an organization and to be addressed by a staff member who tells me, Mr. Matalon, I was a member of the youth program in 2011, 2012, 2013, and it really has made a difference in my life. So I guess those are the two things that I would say I'm most proud of.
Private sector advancing with power, purpose, and drive, growing stronger, growing together, backed by the PSOJ, or advocate and champion. Respected leadership powered by Jamaica's most impactful companies. Our members connect, collaborate, and shape policies that drive growth from advocacy to action. Be part of a network of the best and become even better. Join the PSOJ today. Visit www.psoj.org to sign up or email membership at psoj.org. The PSOJ. Great minds, great businesses, better together.
As a taxi man, every mickle make a muckle. I see him way so BCIC Easy Pay stay.
Get as much as 11 months to pay your car and home insurance while enjoying 100% coverage with BCIC Easy Pay.
What were some of the challenges you faced and how did you navigate them?
Yes, I think there's a saying that says that if you have never run into trouble in business, you probably just haven't been in business long enough. And all of us, I think, in business face bad times. I think the most difficult time for me was post the financial crisis in the 90s. Interest rates moved to 40 and 50%. We were a highly leveraged group. And ultimately, we had to undergo a very significant, both financial and operational restructuring. It was a very grueling process, but we came through it. We did the things that we knew that we needed to do. And ultimately, our own group has ended up far more compact, but also far more profitable and agile. The thing I think out of that I was taught was, the power of resilience and, focusing on your strategy long term and not on your short term setbacks.
What moment has shaped your views on leadership during your career?
Probably the most significant thing and the thing that has stayed with me throughout my career was the advice of a mentor. And that mentor was my father, Matalon. And his watchword for me was integrity. In all things, you need to do the right thing. You need to be clear about why you need to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, you need to proceed on the basis of integrity and transparency. And that really has formed, a lot of my perspectives on doing business in Jamaica and elsewhere.
What advice would you give to future entrepreneurs and business people?
Stay true to your vision, but at the same time, you need to be adaptable. And, the economic landscape is always changing. You need to keep close to what those changes are and to make those adaptations that at the end of the day, you believe are going to allow you to be successful, notwithstanding the changes that may be taking place in the wider economy. So that, I think, is the most significant piece of advice that I would give to young entrepreneurs.
When were you inducted into the PSOJ Hall of Fame, and how did that experience feel?
I was inducted into the Private Sector Hall of Fame in 2018. It was a very humbling experience for me, and I interpreted it as much as a recognition of my own efforts and the outputs of my work over the years, but more important, the recognition of the collective efforts of all those persons that I had worked with over those many, many years. It's a great honor. I can't tell you I wasn't chuffed when I was asked to be inducted. And to this day, it is one of those honors that I prize most amongst any honor and award that I've had. I think I've spoken about some of the work that I did directly as president of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica. But I've also been very privileged over the years to be involved in advocacy efforts around policy formulation and policy reform. And it's not typical that an individual in the private sector would have those opportunities, and I feel very grateful for them. I'd been involved for years in tax reform, going back to 1984. The efforts there, I think, have made a significant difference. But in general, I think, bridging the divide between sectors in the private sector and then between the private sector and the public sector, getting people to recognize that we're all sailing in the same boat, and what we need to do is to understand the point of view of everyone else around the table and find a path through the maze that is good for the country overall, and doesn't disadvantage, any particular sector within the economy.
What's one thing you're especially grateful for right now?
I'm a very grateful person. I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for health. I am grateful for friends and family, colleagues. And I think, to be truly happy, one needs to recognize how grateful they are and have that gratitude for what they've been able to receive and what they've been able to achieve. I'm very, very grateful for the woman that I married. I am very, very grateful for my children. I'm very, very grateful for, most of the people that I have worked with over my entire career, whether within my own business or more broadly within the private sector.
Private sector advancing with power, purpose, and drive, growing stronger, growing together, backed by the PSOJ, or Advocate and Champion. Respected leadership powered by Jamaica's most impactful companies. Our members connect, collaborate, and shape policies that drive growth from advocacy to action. Be part of a network of the best and become even better. Join the PSOJ today. Visit www.psoj.org to sign up or email membership at psoj.org. The PSOJ. Great minds, great businesses, better together.
As a taxi man, every mickle make a muckle. I see way so BCIC easy pay stay.
Get as much as 11 months to pay your car and home insurance while enjoying 100% coverage with BCIC Easy Pay.
How do you maintain a work-life balance?
All right, I can say to you, very honestly, I think it's very important. Okay? No, I can't always tell you that, I have hewed very close to that principle. But my wife has helped to keep me honest, and I do find time to spend with my family. I like time. I like spending time with them. I spend a lot of time with them, either at home or on the North Coast. Have a very close relationship with all of them. For me, friends and family, and friends who are family, is very, very important to me. And the maintenance of those relationships require you, as much as your instincts might tell you otherwise, to kind of slow it down. No fires are going to burn while you spend another hour or so with your family, and that's a good principle. It's a good lesson to learn. Yeah? I know it's hard, I know it's hard, and the big issue with it is that it's difficult to put your mind to sleep, and even when you are with friends and family, it can be very distracting. What I have found very, very helpful in that regard is that every morning I do exercise for an hour and a half, and after that I meditate for maybe half an hour, and I find that tends to clear the mind and set me up very much for the day. And there are all kinds of resources out there that can, help you to do it. I mean, at the beginning, it was very difficult for me, to think about nothing else for half an hour. And you can't avoid it. But what you need to do is, when the thoughts come along, you don't try and push them away, just acknowledge them and let them just float by and do what you do again. My father had 10 siblings, and they all banded together at a point in time to create a business. They came from very humble beginnings. My grandfather sold cloth on a bicycle door to door. My father did the same for a while. My father had to leave JC after what was then Junior Cambridge because the family could not afford for him to continue. It's a legacy, having come from such humble beginnings and having achieved as much as he achieved in his lifetime. That's something that has really been seared into my mind. He told me once, when I was slacking off on things, he said, "Listen, man, this journey is like riding a bicycle. You can coast for so long, but then you have to pedal." And that has always been something that I remember. I think it's a very, very good piece of advice.
Over the last 48 years, the PSOJ has worked with governments, associations, companies, and individuals to promote a competitive and productive private sector. We seek to influence issues of national policy, whether it be of a political, social, or economic nature. The organization, alongside its council, committees, associated companies, and even individuals, contribute directly to making Jamaica a better place, not only to work, but to live. The work of the PSOJ and its members has impacted every single Jamaican in some way or another for the past 48 years. But in 1992, the organization saw it fit to acknowledge the members whose impact and legacy went a step further and truly embodied the meaning of nation building, an impact that can only be described as remarkable. Today, we honor these remarkable men and women not only for their financial aptitude, but also for their impact on the lives of ordinary Jamaicans and the country as a whole. As we approach our 30th year of honors, we saw it fit to spotlight the lives, stories, and contributions of these nation builders who make up the PSOJ Hall of Fame. The PSOJ believes that Jamaica's true potential can only be realized together, and together we can make Jamaica a nation to be proud of, a place to live, work, and raise families.
Still to come on this season of the PSOJ Titans of Industry.
I started as a rebellious young man, terribly rebellious. I was a dropout at school, never went to college, and obviously took the direction that was really just open to me. And we can achieve a lot by working hard and become a workaholic, but it's going to pay the price of something else.
Never overextend yourself. And I thought, when you're young, you're starting off in business and you think you can conquer the world. In a way, being a woman, doing something that is very Jamaican, it inspires young business people, small business people.
William Billy McConnell was a notable figure in Jamaica's business landscape.
Respect, hard work, lead from the front were the ones that really drove him and drove the businesses to do well under him.
private sector advancing with power, purpose, and drive, growing stronger, growing together, backed by the PSOJ, or Advocate and Champion. Respected leadership powered by Jamaica's most impactful companies. Our members connect, collaborate, and shape policies that drive growth from advocacy to action. Be part of a network of the best and become even better. Join the PSOJ today. Visit www.psoj.org to sign up or email membership at psoj.org. The PSOJ. Great minds, great businesses, better together.
As a taxi man, every mickle make a muckle. I see way so BCIC easy pay stay.
Exactly. With my type of business, we have to fret about pay a big money, yet always covered.
Having 11 months to pay my car and home insurance, little by little, puts me at ease.
Get as much as 11 months to pay your car and home insurance while enjoying 100% coverage with BCIC Easy Pay.